Hello.
Hello, everybody. It is Friday.
It is.
And it's a Friday, but I'm at home today.
That's right.
And Beth is here.
I am.
So is all the kids.
And for once, kind of quiet.
Kind of quiet. So we're going to try to get this in before they start getting unquiet. All right, we are still in this book here. We are still in Daniel, chapter 6. Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel 6, starting at verse 1. Darius the Mede decided to divide the kingdom into 120 provinces, and he appointed a high officer to rule over each province. The king also chose Daniel and two others as administrators to supervise the high officers and to protect the king's interests. Daniel soon proved himself more capable than all the other administrators and high officers. Because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. Then the other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs, but they could not find anything to criticize or condemn. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. So they concluded, our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel will be in connection with the rules of his religion. So the administrators and high officers went to the king and said, long live King Darius. We are all in agreement, we administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors, that the king should make a new law that will be strictly enforced. Give orders that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of lions. And now, your majesty, issue and sign this law so it cannot be changed. Any official law of the Medes and Persians that cannot be revoked. So King Darius signed the law. But when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room, with its windows open toward Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he has always done, giving thanks to his God. Then the officials went together to Daniel's house and found him praying and asking for God's help. So they went straight to the king and reminded him about the law. Did you not sign a law for the next 30 days? Any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of lions? Yes, the king replied. That decision stands. It is an official law of the Medes and Persians that cannot be revoked. Then they told the king, that man Daniel, one of the captives from Judah, is ignoring you and your law. He still prays to his God 3 times a day. Hearing this, the king was deeply troubled, and he tried to think of a way to save Daniel. He spent the rest of the day looking for a way to get Daniel out of this predicament. In the evening, the men went together to the king and said, your majesty, you know that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no law that the king's size can be changed. So at last the king gave orders for Daniel to be arrested and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to him, may your God, whom you serve so faithfully, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed the stone with his own royal seal and the seals of his nobles, so that no one could rescue Daniel. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night fasting. He refused his usual entertainment and could not sleep at all that night. The very next morning the king got up and hurried out to the lion's den. When he got there, he called out in anguish, Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God, whom you serve so faithfully, able to rescue from the lions? Daniel answered, long live the king. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me, for I have been found innocent in his sight, and have not wronged you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed and ordered that Daniel be lifted from the den. Not a scratch was found on him, for he trusted in his God. Then the king gave orders to arrest the men who had maliciously accused Daniel. He had them thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. The lions leaped on them and tore them apart before they could even hit the floor of the den. Brutal.
Yeah.
Then King Darius sent this message to the people of every race and nation and language throughout the world. Peace and prosperity to you. I decree that everyone throughout my kingdom should tremble with fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and he will endure forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his rule will never end. He rescues and saves his people. He performs miraculous signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus, the Persian. And now the commentary. At this time, Daniel was over 80 years old and one of Darius's top 3 administrators. Daniel was working with those who did not believe in his God, but he worked more efficiently and capably than all the rest. Thus, he attracted the attention of the pagan king and earned a place of respect. One of the best ways to influence non-Christian employers is to work diligently and responsibly. How well do you represent God to your employer? Daniel made enemies at work by doing a good job. Perhaps you have had similar experience. When you begin to excel, you will find that coworkers may look for ways to hold you back and tear you down. How should you deal with those who would cheer your downfall and even try to hasten it? Conduct your life above reproach. Then you will have nothing to hide, and your enemies will have a difficult time finding legitimate charges against you. Of course, this will not always save you from attacks. And like Daniel, you will have to rely on God for protection. The jealous administrators and officials couldn't find anything about Daniel's life to criticize, so they attacked his religion. If you face jealous critics because of your faith, be glad they're criticizing that part of your life. Perhaps they had to focus on your religion as a last resort. Respond by continuing to believe and live as you should. Then remember that God is in control, fighting this battle for you. In Babylon, the king's word was the law. In the Medo-Persian Empire, when a law was made, even the king couldn't change it. Darius was an effective government administrator, but he had a fatal flaw: pride. By appealing to his vanity, the men talked Darius into signing a law effectively making himself a god for 30 days. This law could not be broken, not even by an important official like Daniel. Another example of irrevocable nature of laws of the Medes and Persian appears in Esther 8, verse 8. Daniel stood alone. Although he knew about the law against praying to anyone except the king, he continued to pray 3 times a day as he always had. Daniel had a disciplined prayer life. Our prayers are usually interrupted, not by threats, but simply by the pressures of our schedules. Don't let threats and pressures cut into your prayer time. Pray regularly, no matter what, for prayer is your lifeline to God. Daniel made no attempt to hide his daily prayer routine from his enemies in government, even though he knew he would be disobeying the new law. Hiding his daily prayer would have been futile, because surely the conspirators would have caught him at something else during the month. Also, hiding would have demonstrated that he was afraid of other government officials. Daniel continued to pray because he could not look to the king for the guidance and strength that he needed during his difficult time. Only God could provide what he really needed. Lions roamed the countryside and forests in Mesopotamia, and the people feared them and greatly respected their power. Some kids hunted lions for sport. The Persians captured lions, keeping them in large parks where they were fed and attended. Lions were also used for executing people, but God has ways of delivering his people that none of us can imagine. It was always premature to give up and give in to the pressure of unbelievers, because God has power they know nothing about. God can even shut the lions' mouths. Even unbelievers witnessed to Daniel's consistency. By his continual service, Daniel had demonstrated his faithful devotion to God. What can unbelievers determine about your life? The person who trusts in God and obeys his will is untouchable until God grants permission to take that person. To trust God is to have immeasurable peace. God who delivered Daniel will deliver you. Do you trust him with your life? In accordance with Persian customs, this cruel punishment was transferred to those who had conspired against the king by provoking him to an unjust action. The king's great anger resulted in the execution of the evil officials and their families. Evil evil deeds often backfire on those who plan cruelty. Nebuchadnezzar had come to believe that Israel's God was real because of the faithfulness of Daniel and his friends. Here Darius was also convinced of God's power because Daniel was faithful and God rescued him. Although Daniel was captive in a strange land, his devotion to God was testimony to powerful rulers. If you find yourselves in new surroundings, take the opportunity to testify about God's power in your life. Be faithful to God so He can use you to make an impact on others. And I guess this is probably a lesson for us, as you know, it is said that we should obey our rulers, you know, and all the laws until they cross God.
Right.
So, you know, we need to bear that in mind in these trying times that we have right now, that yes, we should obey the laws of the land until it crosses God, and then it looks like we have the right to disobey.
Right, and then we have to really use discernment to know, because Satan will use just enough truth mixed in with his deception to make it sound like it's a good idea and it's sounding scriptural, but you got to really get in the Word and study and know if it's according to Scripture or if it's off just enough to not be Scripture.
Yep.
Because and use a hard copy Scripture, because they're talking about changing it to where it's more socially acceptable.
Right.
So use a hard copy Scripture, but study the Word and know what is actually Scripture, and use your discernment that God gives you, and pray for discernment.
Pray for discernment. That's the whole issue right there.
If you want something really fun,
better hurry up.
Look up the song Daniel in the Lion's Den, that's sang by the Veggie Tales.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a cute little song that goes with today's lesson. It's,
Daniel
oh no, what we gonna do if the king likes Daniel more than me and you?
Oh boy. Okay. All right. Hope everybody has a glorious start to your weekend, and we'll talk to you later.
Make everybody smile.